Sorry.
So we haven't seen you in a while there, Austin. So you were posting some stuff that I thought was kind of interesting, right? You were talking about the recent elections in Florida, and I can't remember when we were doing our predictor, but you were saying that maybe you were the one saying that like those seats wouldn't flip. Like they weren't going to flip just because they're too red and everything like that. But like you were saying, like they were going to take a big hit on like the percentages. And I think you were showing some of that earlier. Like it'd be like a crazy win uh if if the Democrats had the advantage that they got from that recent election. So what did you think was like the most interesting thing now that you see the results?
From like last night in general, or
Yeah. Like trends.
honestly,
What do you think is out there? Like do you think that changes any narratives or anything like that?
no. I mean, I think when we did the predictions thing, I think I was one that said they would probably take back the house. So I mean, for me, that was not
In
really anything.
2026?
Yeah, or like I
Okay.
mean, I guess at this point, I mean, like
Yeah.
if they did pick up a Florida House seat, I mean, they really only need to get one more seat to get the House technically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
I know we were like Elise Stefanik being in the or in the UN back when she was announced. We're like, that's kind of dumb.
I mean
We're
that's
like, that doesn't
it's.
make any sense.
I do think it says it speaks volumes. Before last night, they were already like calling her back to the House. So,
Yeah.
uh,
So like demographically, coalitionally, like anything that stands out to you.
no, I haven't really a chance to look at like the crosstabs or anything yet. Probably the funniest thing from last night I would say would be what was it? That was like a Wisconsin judiciary seat. I think it was like their state Supreme
Oh yeah,
Court. Like
the
it's
Supreme Court
Yeah,
one.
we were endorsing that race.
oh really? So like the really liberal candidate won, but then like Wisconsin voted for like voter ID. So it's just like just
Voter
like what do you
ID
guys
won
do?
though. Voter ID did win.
Yeah, they both won by like double digits. So it's just again it's really weird. But anyway. It's just
So I
funny
don't.
to like see how people vote, and like it's
Well,
just
but
really
did you
schizophrenic.
did you hear what they said about the voter ID laws? So
No,
they were saying that now that Republicans are becoming more working class and Democrats are becoming more middle class and upper wealthy people, they were saying that Democrats aren't pushing for voter ID anymore because the voter suppression that they're calling it is now actually working for them to suppress Republican working class vote. So I can kind
yeah,
of like if the Democrats won in the Supreme Court, it's like, well, maybe they're winning over here too, you know?
hmm that's kind of well. I mean, it kind of goes back to realignment. Now we're seeing the oddities from that. But
So do you think? I mean, so it was what was it 17 point swing?
it
Is
was
that what it
like
was?
it was some like high double digit margin deal. I don't remember the exact percentages.
And so do you think that's going to be reproducible? Doesn't Virginia have a election in 2025?
Yeah, it's got governor's race, and then New Jersey
Like
is also
yeah,
governor's
like
race.
New Jersey. Do you think you're going to see something like a blowout in 2025?
After today, yeah, sure.
No, no.
I wouldn't feel too. I mean, it really depends on like how serious these are, and like if they end up like walking it back, like they've walked back everything. But like somebody I followed made a really good point. He was like, "There's really no way you can walk these back after you made it in such like a huge deal without like losing face, because you made this whole like it's Liberation Day, and then if you walk them back like next week, you're just going like it's." They've burnt through so much political capital in like the past week. I really don't discount anything at this point.
Yeah.
Fact.
So what?
It's just
So keep going.
it's just really stupid stuff. Like at this point, I really don't even know what they're doing. Like it does not make sense to me.
So, um, here's my reaction to kind of all this, and then Josh, you're the political strategist guy here, so you can or the organizer and all that kind of stuff. So then you can kind of follow up with what you think. So for me, I think from like a democratic standpoint, and just kind of like what I'm seeing and hearing, is everyone's like super excited about it and everything like that. They're like, oh, great, we're gonna win these and everything like that. But honestly, like, you know, I think they could have gotten another 5, 6, 7%. You know what I mean? Like I think it could have been a lot more competitive if they're more organized and everything like that. And I actually the one time the few times I've tweeted here is I tweeted out and I was like if Hakeem Jeffries doesn't dump $5 million into all these 2025 races, then he needs to be kicked out of leadership. So like for me, I kind of look at this and say, yeah, like maybe they're gonna not be trying to get rid of like Hakeem, right? And so like I think like okay, it's a win, but it's not like great, but it kind of shows okay, hey, if we capitalize on this, in these other races, and we can kind of get a messaging around it, we could do really well. So like that's kind of like what we're seeing on our end. I'm looped in with some of the Gottheimer stuff in New Jersey, and like I think that'll be interesting. And that one I think will be really interesting because I think you're gonna have a much wider field, and so I think the Democratic primary there is going to be kind of interesting to see if all these kind of Republicans or whatever you want to call them, or independents that then switch over to Democrats, which one would they more likely go to? Like would they go into like a blue dog, or would they kind of go into more like really, really liberal group? Because you hear Bernie and you see all them kind of doing their show tour, and so I think it'll be just interesting to just kind of see like okay, like which one of these groups is going to come out of this better, because I think like some of the more progressive ends are kind of on their way out, but I don't know. What do you think, Josh? What are you kind of seeing?
Like post election, or like what I think's going to happen.
Both.
So post election, so AFP Action, we endorsed. I can't say we. So AFP Action endorsed Brad Schimmel, just like Elon Musk was behind him and Trump got behind him. And I saw the things, but I've been up in Wisconsin. We knocked before for their Senate race we knocked for Eric Hubdy, who was going against I can't think of what her name is, but she was going for Senate, and we lost that. And Wisconsin is really bad on their voter thing. So, do I think the most important thing was voter ID? I do. It got because they vote on that. Voter ID got passed in Wisconsin. I think that was a big thing. But I will say we're in a situation now where, and like I think you all said it in our group chat, was Trump's going to have to start asking people to go back to their House seats, because I think you're in a situation where just like I said a year ago, I talked to Congresswoman Harshbarger. We talked about it at length, and it was like, what the fuck are we going to do if Trump takes everybody and we lose the majority in the House? Because then it doesn't mean dick what you do as president. It's like you're going to sit there and lose. So I think you're going to get to a point where you're asking people to go back. I just don't think there was I don't think there was a course of plan for this.
But I think it's almost better that they go back.
I do too. I agree.
Like I think like look at Mike Waltz now. Like look at him. It's like, hey, like would you rather have him in the NFC or would you rather have him back in Florida? I think Trump would be like, I would rather have him back in Florida.
I would rather have him back in Florida too. Which I said that about a lot of the Trump picks, which honestly, great video that we should honestly bring back up and like review. Andrew, is like when we did the initial Trump pick videos. I'm so glad we started doing this when the Trump picks came out. But like, yeah, like there's some people that, like you said, like Waltz there. It's like, where would you rather have him? And I'm like you. I'd rather have him back in Florida.
Yeah.
With Florida situation, I'd rather have him there. So in a way, yes, I think what happened in Wisconsin, we got a good thing, but still, dude, losing that Supreme Court race. I mean, we saw what happened to Amy Coney Barrett and others. It's like, okay, you're wishy-washy, kind of rhino-ish. So it sucks to lose it, but you got to keep the majority or you're screwed.
So that's interesting. What do you think? What do you think, Austin?
In terms of like like calling people back to the house, or
Yeah, I guess like do you think like what's kind of your perspective on all these people going back to the house? Honestly, one of the other ones that Josh was kind of alluding to is just like some of the ineptitude of some of the people that are, you know, uh, Homeland Security.
basically,
That's a perfect one for
it,
me. I'm looking at it, I'm like, I don't really think Christy Nome, like especially with these like guys with green cards getting deported. That's kind of looking like a clusterfuck a little bit. They're not deporting as many as they said they were going to do. And they're kind of getting some blowback on the whole Costa Rican thing or whatever it was. It's
El
like, yeah,
Salvador.
like that's not really looking too good. So like what do you kind of think of like the current people running the administration and you know maybe they should have stayed in their previous position?
I mean, we called this months ago. I mean, like I distinctly remember us bringing this up multiple times, just like it did not make any sense, and it was immediately clear like this would be an issue. I honestly think they thought they had the way they acted was like they had a majority of like 240 instead of it being like like 219 or whatever it was. Like it just none of this made sense, and you're
Well,
now you're now seeing that come home.
yeah, and like one thing I was thinking about was it was almost kind of like Trump kind of sold the house. Like he was kind of like, okay, like, usually I wouldn't do anything with RFK, but I kind of needed RFK's like support. And so like I brought him in and like same thing with Tulsi. So it's like, okay, you gotta get a spot, you gotta get a spot, you gotta get what you want. Um, I think Elise Stefanik, she was the kind of the same way. It's like, okay, I gotta get you up. Like everyone kind of get their piece. And I feel like it kind of really made it hard for him to kind of like, really say no to anybody or, kind of have more competent people in there. Because it's like everyone who supported you, you have to give them a spot.
Honestly, at this point, I would not be surprised if it's just like he didn't care. Like it just like there's too many confusing things coming out. They're contradictory. They just. I mean, the thing I go back to is if we could see this, then definitely people in power could see this. Like this was not a hard prediction to make, and like the fact that like they just now seem to be grasping it is either they willfully overlooked it or they literally like they're just incompetent, and that's kind of where I'm
So,
at
but
personally.
let me challenge you on that though. Do you
Mhm.
think that, and I was thinking about this a little bit too, like so like if I became in political office or got elected or something like that, would my kind of viewpoint on some of these issues change? You know what I mean? Being like, oh, like if we could think of that, they could think of that. But almost kind of like, well, like sometimes I guess if you're in the bubble, maybe you can't like really hear and you're kind of like skewed on your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like you're in the bubble, yeah, but that's an indictment of the fact you're in a bubble. Like you shouldn't like there.
You're saying it's not an excuse.
Yeah, I mean, like we've like I get to a certain degree, you're always like you're you're in the White House, or whatever. You're going to be kind of there's going to be a degree of like barrier between you and like information flow, but it's like you've got enough aides, you have enough people that you can, you've got enough of an inner circle that are not there that you can kind of tap on. And then too, it's like you can't tell me these people don't get on social media and they can't just like there's just to me it's just like there's a whole point where like the bubble excuse like it just does not work. I'm sorry. Like to me personally that's just not a valid excuse, especially in this day and age. Like if this was like 1948 or something, I would get it. But like we live in an age where like your advisors are constantly posting on like Twitter or whatever. Like it's not that impossible for them to kind of read the room. And I know they can read the room because like if you guys remember that back around,
So
I
you're
think it was
saying that like they're thinking these thoughts, but they come to different conclusions for other
I
reasons.
don't I honestly think it could just be a simple thing or they're just not caring. Like honestly, that's kind of the vibe I'm getting from people I talk to, and like what I was like. I know for a fact they can read social media. I know for a fact they do. Like it was started a second ago. Back around Christmas when they had that whole thing over the H-1B visas,
Yeah.
like the whole like that whole thing was a huge flare up on like Twitter. And I know for a fact a lot of them seen it because after it kind of died down a little bit, they made comments or whatever, and some of them were even like directly involved in it. Like Musk himself was personally involved in it. So it's like
So
I
here's a
know you,
question.
yeah.
I was gonna say, but do you think that's why like someone like Vivek left? It was kind of
No,
like, oh, these.
from what I understand of that
That's
whole
what I've always
situation,
heard about Vivek is it's like he kind of got in. They kind of started brainstorming, laying out how they're gonna do it, and it was kind of like, yeah, like that's a little fucking crazy, or like that's a little too far. That's a little politically unviable, you know. And I always thought like
Yeah.
that's what I'd always heard is like that was kind of Vivek's perspective, and that's why like he left, and everyone is just kind of going along with it.
So my understanding was he was mostly a scapegoat because like he was one of the main people pushing for like the thing, and then it's just like okay, if we get rid of him, that takes But that in of itself should tell you that the bubble excuse is not viable because it's like if they knew enough to kind of shiv him to the wayside, that's they're paying attention, but the fact they're not, either they're high off their own supply or they really just don't have any conception at this point. And there's so many things going on right now that kind of suggest to me it's definitely like in a bubble, and I don't think it's a kind of a valid excuse either.
So, Josh, do you think they are? Do you think they're insulated?
Like in what way?
Like, do you think that like okay, like yeah, like just as Austin saying, like you've got their advisors that should know better, should be, they're able to be held accountable. Um, but it's like okay, like can we though? Like, are we actually going to hold these people accountable? Is there a way?
Um, yeah, I do. I do think they're insulated a little bit. I've done this enough now in the political strategist kind of realm and things. Your advisor needs to know better, and if that and that's my opinion. I mean, these people are elected officials doing X, Y, and Z, and thousand different ways from things like your advisors are typically people that are close to you and things. They have to know better. Um, and like so, in a way, they should have seen it coming. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
I mean,
makes
I
sense.
get that, but I guess it kind of goes back to what Austin's saying, where it's like they just don't care.
They don't care. I think it's a check thing at that point.
So, but and this is what I'm kind of saying is it's like,
Yes,
do you
sir.
think the Republicans in the House are going to try to hold them responsible or hold them accountable?
At the current moment, no.
Do you think there could be?
Yes, I think there could be. I think at the current moment, no, but there could be.
How many would that be? Because yeah, I mean, and we can start talking about tariffs a little bit here, but I mean, you guys saw before we got on, it was what 52 to 48 vote
Well, our country was
Senate.
founded on tariffs. First off, like everybody else does it. We should be able to do it. Like, we won both world wars, which I think we were still on the wrong side of it. But like, you know, we still won both world wars, and like our country was founded on tariffs. So like, in a way, we talk about it and everything. Um, I don't really know what the number should be, but I do think there should be a number, and there needs to be accountability for the advisors.
What do you think, Austin?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with what he just said. That makes a lot of sense to me, honestly.
So, and I guess this is what kind of irritates me because it's like, but I'm like, the Democrats were kind of the same way. Back when Biden was old and everyone's like, he's got to get out of the race. You know, I mean, they were saying that for a while and they were like, nope, they ignored it. And I almost kind of think, okay, so like, what's it going to take for, assuming Donald Trump's the same way, assuming him and Elon are insulated enough to the same point, I'm like, huh, what would it take? Like seriously, like what, like oh, what a grandma doesn't get her check, her social security check, like that's not going to really do anything. And so I almost think about it, I'm like, what would have to happen for that to happen? Like what kind of an event do you think it would be? What do you think, Austin? Like,
I
do you think
think
it's
we're
like
about to
war?
find out.
Like, do you think it's war? Do you think it's like another Great Recession? Like, what do you
I mean,
think?
you're kind of looking at two possible scenarios for both right now. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to stuff in the Persian Gulf, but they're moving like really heavy assets to the region now. I don't. There's not going to be like a ground invasion or anything, but they're definitely moving in air assets for a prolonged campaign if it comes to that. Uh, Diego Garcia, which is our main like base down the Indian Ocean, I think has like 6 or 7 B-2 bombers on it right now, which is like the most it's seen since like
It's always had that though, right?
it's always been a base. No, like 6 or 7. Our entire fleet of B-2 bombers is 21. We have just 21. So if
Yeah,
there's
I thought there were some there, and then they were moving some to I think like Australia, and
well, Diego
then
Garcia is a lot closer to our end than
right,
Australia is.
right. But I
So
guess it
they've
was
they've
like
got
there's a lot of them positioned there. I guess what I'm trying to say.
they moved 6 into position in Diego Garcia, and then I think there's another one. I think at Kadena in Okinawa that's due to be deployed to Diego Garcia. I don't know if it's already on Violent or not. So that was the first they've done that since like I think somebody told me it was like 2004 2005, which checks out because that was early Iraq War. So kind of that they've got a second carrier group on the way. They've moved like they've been what was it? They've moved at least. I'd have to pull it up. I had it. Somebody sent it to me. I had it saved. They're moving like Patriot batteries, THAAD batteries out of the Pacific. So I mean, they're moving heavy assets, and then there is definitely signs that they might try to do an air campaign. So there's that, and that could really spiral out of control really
So, but
fast. And then,
let's talk about that for a little bit. So, like, do you think, like, and I mean, honestly, and this is what's interesting about the signal chat stuff was, I mean, the way they were talking about it, it was almost kind of like, yeah, like we could be bombing or be in a very, very aggressive state with Iran, like tomorrow.
we'll see.
You know what I mean? And I
To
feel
make
like that's what kind
yeah,
of worries me. It's like, wait, what? Like,
no, yeah, and then
I don't think like this would be bigger than the Iraq War. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And bigger geopolitical implications, everything like that. And it's like, man, that was a fuck up. I don't really know if I want to do that right now. You
I
know,
don't think
I don't know if that's like really something we should be throwing on our plate.
well, yeah, for sure. And then too, like you brought up the signal chat. So, like originally when we talked about like a couple of weeks ago, I was kind of like, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. But then I had a close friend who he's a journalist, and I was kind of talking with him. He's like, dude, you really don't get it. He's like, one of the things that really stood out to me was like, okay, first of all, why are they all doing this on Signal, and why is it like everybody from the vice president on down, like, but the president himself is not involved? And the way they're talking, it's like they're trying to figure out what he wants. So like the point he made to me is like, towards like the final days, like the Biden presidency, everybody was kind of like, it's really just his advisors and like staffers and stuff running it. He's really not. He said that whole ordeal kind of gave me the same vibe. So it's like, he's there, but he's not really, maybe not necessarily completely out of control, but it's kind of clear that like a lot of the decision making's kind of devolved. So that's kind of the same vibes we got from like the Biden term. But it's
Well,
also just, and he made the point like too, it's like, I think people forget like he's 82 now. Like he's kind of pushing it too. So I mean, like, there's that, and then it's just like you're seeing all this like people are caught up in this or that, but it's like, yeah, like the whole Iran thing that could really go bad, and like they're giving all the indications it will go bad. And then you too, like to like what's going on now with the economy. I mean, I don't know. Like it really is kind of the seeds. If you wanted to, you can completely emoliate this presidency. So I mean, there's that, but there's the water, geostrategic situation too. That's just being like we're moving THAAD batteries and Patriot missiles out of the Pacific theater. There's no carrier groups in the Pacific right now. We have 0 active carrier groups in the Pacific. We moved. I think it's the Harry S. Truman was already off the coast of Yemen, and now we're moving the Carl Vinson. So
mhm.
it's like we have no carriers in the Pacific. We already, based on the documents and what I've been told, like what's publicly available, they kind of think they'll need like the estimate I heard was like 30 like THAAD and Patriot batteries. We currently have 7 Patriot batteries in total, like anywhere, and now there's like I want to say like 3 or 4 of them are in the Middle East. So it's like, and then too, I don't know if you guys saw that, but like China's doing like some major like exercises around Taiwan. So it's like you're basically denuding the Pacific to like, I mean, like this, it just none of this makes sense. Like there's just it to me, it just seems like it's, and then the point like I just said about where like my friend was kind of going, it's like it doesn't seem like anybody's really at the top in decision making. Like that's the vibe it gives at this point because it's like you're advisors are trying to run things, but everybody's got their own agenda, everybody's got their own factions and stuff, and then you're just seeing things spiral out of control. And I think that's kind of the vibe I get at this point.
So, Josh, you got anything you want to add to that before I kind of want to steel man a little bit. I'll give it a half-ass attempt. The position, like why we should go in and bomb Iran. Um, but I want to hear Josh if you got anything you want to add. You got anything?
Wait, like for what?
For like the U.S. going to war with potentially with Iran and the conflict in that region and kind of some of the stuff that's happening.
Uh, I don't know. I mean, like, geopolitical wars are typically not in my arsenal of knowledge too much. Yeah, but or expertise. But I will say I don't know that the Iran thing for me is weird. I don't exactly know the full on conflict of how I feel about it. I'm kind of more on the Ukraine side of things with it, but I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Andrew?
I mean, so here's kind of here's kind of what I've thought. What I've kind of been thinking about with the Iran thing. Is I'm like Israel's kind of done a bunch of the work, and it's like okay, they decapitated Hezbollah. You've got a more Western friendly regime in Syria,
And I do agree with you on Israel doing a lot of the work. By the way, like I'm with
and
you there.
you know Hezbollah, they kind of are in there in Gaza for Hamas. Um, you know, other than like obviously some groups in Iraq and the Houthis, but mostly it's the Houthis. Other than them, like Iran's kind of proxies are pretty weakened, right? Like I think there's like Iran's not super fond of like kind of what's going on in Afghanistan as well. It's like I think the U.S. honestly is like kind of positioned to where if it's like, hey, Russia, like we'll do a little bit of this stuff here in Ukraine, but like we're getting rid of Iran. I think I could totally see that kind of being the route that they want to go. Because I think the Trump administration is just done. They're like I don't want to deal with this freaking Iran people anymore. And I think they're just like, all right, like honestly, like now's better than never, you know. And it's like we're not going to let an opportunity go by. And I think that's why you got people like Lindsey Graham who are like, yep, like that's what we're going to do. Let's go bomb Iran because now's the best time we're going to do it. Do you have anything you want to add, Austin, or any perspective?
In terms of like what would be the rationale for it, or
Yeah, like I mean, like what do you think about what I just said? Like I said, like now, like I think about it and it's like, hey, like if you can get this done real quick, like it could be a big win for the United States.
I would okay, like I don't mean this is like a hateful way, but like coming out of 20 years of Afghanistan, really basically 20 years of Iraq, there's no quick and easy. Like I know we always kind of tell ourselves we'll just bomb this and then it won't matter, but it's like I've talked to a lot of people. Like U.S. Army itself did like I think it was like a 3 volume like I can't remember how many millions of words like retrospective on Iraq, and I think they posted that like the last volume of it like in 2022 or 2023. I can't remember which. And like their fundamental conclusion was like there was no victory here. Like we went in, yeah, we like absolutely demolished it. We killed I can't remember how many insurgents they thought they killed and stuff. It's like at the end of the day, like that just left us strategically weakened, and it's like
So, but
the
so here's what I guess what like I'm saying like they would do. They would probably launch a few missiles, but I don't know if they're going to do a full on boots on the ground kind of thing.
oh they
I
won't,
think
and
the way that
that's
they look at it is like, hey, we're going to kind of throw some projectiles over there, and we're going to get everyone else in the Middle East essentially at this point on our side, and we're going to kind of do a coalition here and be like, hey, like this government's going to change, and I think they're going to put pressure and do a regime change that way. But I don't know if they're going to go in and occupy the country. Like I don't think they're going to do anything like that.
oh they won't. I mean, like I said, there's no sign like even if they wanted to do a ground thing, we don't have the capacity for that anymore. Like complete, you cannot do another Iraq war just on the logistics alone. But like, yeah, you topple Iran again. Like we toppled Saddam. You saw what came of that. We toppled the Taliban in Afghanistan. Guess what? The Taliban came right back. Like I don't. And then too, it's like we launched the largest air campaign since World War II in Vietnam, and again, we saw how that turned out. Like you, air power alone cannot. You know, it just air power alone is not sufficient. You have to do boots on the ground if you want to do something, and even then, it's not a guarantee, as we've learned twice in the last like 25 years.
But
Yeah,
you don't think like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, some of Iraq, UAE, Abu Dhabi, all those kind of people. You don't think that they would front the boots on the ground and then the U.S. supply air power, and that's how they would accomplish it? I mean,
we
and I guess in the example I was going to give, which is a terrible example, now that I'm thinking about it, I was going to say, well, isn't that what they kind of did in Yemen? Right? And it's like, well, Yemen's not really looking too hot, so I wouldn't use it as an example. But
they
yeah, something like that. Like I could see them doing that if they try to go against Iran.
they did. I mean, like they tried that in Yemen, and like it ended horribly. Like they got kicked out of it. Like tens. I think it was like Saudi Arabia alone took like I know it was at least 10,000 or more casualties. I can't remember what the exact amount was. I mean, they were knocking like F-15. Like so, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and all them have like their air forces are pretty much like American air forces. They've got the same equipment. A lot of the personnel is Americans they've hired and stuff. They were getting F-15s knocked out of the air left and right. I mean, like it's I just again like we've tried this multiple times. We've tried it in different variations. I mean, probably the closest example to what you're kind of thinking of would be, and this would be a good one, would be Libya in 2011. Like, yeah, we did air power, and then like rebels on the ground did the ground level effort, and yeah, they toppled Gaddafi. But then, I mean, look where Libya is at
Yeah,
nowadays.
not super stabilized.
Yeah, and like ISIS was really big there back in the day. I just, and then too, it's like Iran is completely different. Iran has like the population of Iraq and Afghanistan combined. They have 3,000. Well, as of 2021, the estimate from CENTCOM was they had like 3,000 ballistic missiles, and that was back in 2021. Like,
But
you know,
the one thing that I feel like I've got on my side on this though is I feel like Iran is at least a developed country. Like their people, like I mean, before the Ayatollahs came in, I mean, they were like the jewel of the Middle East. It was always them, and to an extent, they still are. It's not really Saudi Arabia. It's kind of Iran was always the center of the Middle East, and I think that's still there. I think they just kind of need a little bit of a change in government and taking the religious aspect out of it. And I mean, they kind of have that a little bit with kind of like a democratically elected people there, but I think you got to start kind of getting the religious aspect out. Um, and I think they could do that. I think if there was enough uprising, I mean, it's not like the the Ayatollahs or anything like that are practicing mainstream Muslim religion. They're probably going more extreme, you know.
yeah, but again, like, can you think of any examples where, like, yeah, let's try to enforce our own set of values or whatever on a people via force of arms that typically, yeah, sometimes that has worked, but traditionally that's taken immense costs, both in for both sides. It's taken years. It's taken heavy losses. Probably the most successful example I can think of is World War II, like what came out of it with like Germany and Japan and stuff. But like
Well, that's
again,
what I
that's
was going to say. I was like, well, I'd probably say like Germany, Japan, and then maybe a little bit more recently, I would probably say parts of Eastern Europe if you count that.
I mean
Um,
we didn't militarily go into Eastern Europe though.
yeah, but I guess I would say more like kind of the Balkans.
Well, I would point out like yeah we did intervene there, but like Serbia to this day is still like in the Russian sphere of influence. So
Yeah, but that's just kind of cultural stuff.
well
But
yeah,
if
but like if
you look at like
but that
Croatia,
but that's kind of the point.
it
Like
used to
yeah,
be on a
cultural
different.
stuff like bombing Tehran is not going to change the culture of the Iranian people. Like,
No,
and I and
but
I do
you,
th-
I
and
think
I
I
do
think if you get a change, the where that is on a spectrum of where they are now and maybe Saudi Arabia on the other end is you'd move it at least halfway more towards kind of the Saudi Arabian position. I'm not saying they're going to be amazing. It's kind of like, hey, like Poland. isn't like the most democratically, democratic country out there, right? But it's like, yeah, but I would take them over a Russia or them over a Belarus. Like, I'm not saying they got to be perfect, and there's going to be changes and there's going to be nuances, but I think that they, as long as they're kind of more aligned with what the rest of the countries in the region are doing, I think it's fine. I'll
Well,
take whatever,
let
whatever
me
they
give
want.
you let me give you an example because I think you're not kind of visualizing them as independent actors in a sense. So if tomorrow China decided like, hey, we're back in this one side of the political spectrum in America, and we're going to conduct airstrikes on these targets in order, to like hopefully move the people of America into this one side. Would you be more willing to go to that one side, or would you be more angry at the Chinese for conducting airstrikes and killing people, or destroying your country's like economy?
Like, but here's my thing with that. It's kind of like, well, what did we do leading up to it? And I was watching, actually was listening to a debate about this. It was kind of like, like, um, yeah, the Pearl Harbor was bad, but it's like, was the United States supposed to be doing an oil blockade on Japan? Like, okay, like that kind of was sending signals, and kind of some of the other stuff they were doing was sending signals, and it's like, well, I can kind of see like why that could have been hostile to another country. Right. And I'm like, okay, if we're doing that and then we kind of get surprise bomb, like, yeah, like Unity, we're gonna go do all that kind of stuff. We're in it now. But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, I'm not gonna say that we're a victim here. You know what I mean? Like we kind of gotta own a little bit of this.
Yeah, I mean, like you can think that, but you're assuming that everybody else thinks the same way. Like we'll have the
Well,
same
you
viewpoint of
asked me
that.
what I was gonna do. I'm not gonna. I
Yeah,
don't. I mean, I know exactly what everyone else is gonna do. I mean, they're
but
like, fuck
and to,
that
and
guy.
and to bringing up like Japan, like the thing I'll point out is like, yeah, we eventually won that war, but then everybody kind of forgets that like by I think it was 1944, like 400,000 people were dying every month. Like, yeah, we won, but like the costs were like immense, and I mean, in the long run, I would say it did work out in our favor, but like, it's not 1944 anymore. Like it's
So
like
I was gonna say, did I ever tell you what I always thought about the casualties, or basically U.S. casualties in basically the 20th century? I was like, we got off pretty fucking good. Like I mean, I know you know this. You go look at any of these countries from World War One, and I mean, like the civilization is changed because it's like, oh yeah, we lost like towns lost like half their population.
mhm.
And it was just like they were just like huge scar on the country. It's like, the United States has never really had that. We always kind of got into these wars at the very end of it. And I think
Well,
about like if we went to war with China or Tehran or whoever, I'm like, we're gonna like the casualty rates is gonna be really high. You know, that's just how it's gonna be. Because like we've always gotten in on the back end of it, but if we're going against Iran for 4 years, like you're gonna accrue some casualties.
they have. I think the last time I saw a population estimate was like 97 million. So they have about, if you look at it in terms of like, they're about a third of our population. So yeah, like, and then like the thing I think about too, like like we're all Zoomers, so I mean it's really hard for people to remember this far back, like back in 2008. So if you want to talk about a good time to like start a war, it would have been back in the 2000s because we had bases all in Iraq, we had bases all in Afghanistan, we had Iran surrounded, and this was like a big talking point at the time. Was everybody was like, Iran's probably next because they got it surrounded, and then of course we kind of saw how like really quick to kind of make a point, like one thing the U.S. Army brought up in its retrospective study was like the only people that won the Iraq War were the Iranians. Like, we're sitting here fighting in Iraq and they're just supplying the insurgency and, we're, suffering for it.
Yeah.
But there was, in 2008, there was really, really high
Hold
tensions
on,
with
real
our,
quick.
yeah,
Guess when Hamas came into power?
2006.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's the
It's like
same
it's
era.
like yeah, well, not it wasn't just in Iraq where they took advantage. You
Oh,
know,
yeah. I mean, like the whole region was basically inflamed.
that's they really kind of started getting back more into power in the early 2000s.
Well, if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, back in 2006, there was a bunch of like terror attacks on like oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia. Like people don't realize like how very serious that situation. But even back then, could have spiraled. But anyway, uh, so back in 2008, so like same time frame, there was multiple incidents with the Iranians. Like I think one of the cases was like there was like a British Army helicopter that got shot down or something, and then there was I think the Iranians had some speedboats get into some like scuffles with their ships in the Persian Gulf and stuff. So this was like January 2008. And, like I said, like we had Iran surrounded at the time. Everybody was kind of thinking like, this might, this might be finally in, it might pop up with Iran now. Oil shot up to the highest it has ever been. It shot to $150 a barrel or thereabouts. And that's not adjusted for inflation. That was like in 2008 money, which today I think would be, I can't remember the exact amount. I think it'd be about 230 if I'm not mistaken. So, we're complaining about high oil prices when it's like $100 a barrel. Imagine what it'd be like if it shot up to like 250, which would be a realistic scenario if we get into like a scuffle with the Iranians. Like all the oil infrastructure in Saudi Arabia is next to the Gulf, like Bahrain and stuff. Which is in Saudi Arabia, huge. Qatar, Bahrain, all the Iranian infrastructures on their coast. I mean, obviously, because they want to do exports and stuff. The Iraqi stuff is right there. The UAE stuff right there. If you get into a conflict in that region, like we've seen it enough now to know, like when gas prices go up, people get really, really angry. Now imagine if you're hitting like I said, like after Russia invaded Ukraine, I think it shot to what, like $100 a barrel, $120 a barrel, and that was enough to get everybody kind of riled up. Like gas was up to like, I think that was the first time in my adult life I'd ever seen gas above $4. Where I lived. Now imagine it's $8 a gallon. Imagine it's $9 a gallon, $10 a gallon. Because I mean, like if it's $2.30 a barrel, you're going to be looking at least above $5 a gallon. Like
So
the political and economic consequences of that cannot be understated. Like there is actually a lot of people in the field of economics that thinks that was a very big, if underrated, cause for the 2008 recession. And like there has been some studies that have been like, yeah, this was a big factor. Like a lot of people don't, everybody thinks like Fannie and Freddie Mae, which again, that the subprime mortgages, that was the main issue. But if you're back in 2008, you're making, I think minimum wage back then was like $5.15 an hour, and then gas shoots up to over $5 a gallon. People that took on those subprime mortgages cannot afford both gas and to pay their subprime mortgage.
So, but because America is quote unquote energy independent, right?
For now,
be okay.
So
now Europe will most definitely be fucked, but given on basically what we're seeing with the Ukraine war, but it's like okay, they're basically gonna be fucked, and it's like okay, China gets most of their oil from the Middle East, and it's like okay, so would we be okay? Like, is that kind of almost
no.
help us?
So the U.S. is energy independent.
Like
the U.S. is energy independent in the sense that, like, if you just looked at solely oil production versus consumption, yeah. But the problem with that is, so all oil is not the same as all oil. So
I know, and we make a certain kind and we actually ship it out.
Yes, because we can't actually refine it.
Yeah.
So we actually still import, if I remember correctly, we import most of our, I think it's our gasoline. We export diesel and import gasoline. And I cannot remember how much of it is Middle Eastern character, but even if you're getting like kind of segue for just a quick second, they're putting all these tariffs on Venezuela and they're shutting down all the stuff there. So Venezuela is like our second largest source point. And then like our third largest source import before 2022 was Russia. So, whatever. But two, the way global oil markets work, even if you're importing from, say, Nigeria, you get like 90% of your oil from Nigeria. Well, if you take out like 60% of global, or let's say 50% of global oil production because the Gulf is shut down, yeah, you're fine. Like it's ostensibly you're fine because you're getting it from Nigeria. And Nigeria is nowhere close to like the battlefield, but then you're suddenly having everybody else compete for that same oil because everybody, you got to have oil no matter what. So everybody's going to be like, Yeah, before you could have got it like a good rate, but now you're getting competition from Europe, you're getting competition from India, you're getting competition from China. So I mean, like, yeah, and like in theory you would be fine, but no, because you've suddenly got all that competition for that. And then two, oil is typically priced on like benchmark prices. So you got like your Brent, you got your West Texas Intermediate. So like, yeah, like you might be like, oh yeah, I can still get oil from Argentina because Argentina's now kind of producing shale. Like, yeah, that'll be fine. We'll just get it from Argentina. It's like, no, because that's still going to go up because it's still tied in the global oil markets. And then two, like,
And then two, we're going to put tariffs on it.
yeah, we are. That's the other thing with Venezuela. Like, we're putting tariffs on their oil too after we
Like, what are
let
you doing?
like I think it was Exxon was getting really big down there. Like that was one of the things the
Yeah.
Biden administration said they'd let Exxon get like huge down there.
Yeah, they had to get special approvals.
Yeah, and they were
So
starting to produce
they were
again.
very much like, hey, like let's not do regime change. And if you are, like, make sure you protect our oil refineries.
So it's
I think
like
they're offshore or something, or they're either offshore or they're off in like one specific part of the country.
yeah, it's a mess down there. Like the other thing too was like the Guyana thing, but that's also kind of. And then two, the other thing like I need to make a point of, like I've said in the group chat, but I don't think we ever really discussed it. So we've been producing a lot of oil, yes, but oil is a finite resource. Now pretty much every basin except for the Permian has peaked, which means it's now going to plateau and then start declining. Like we can't keep increasing production, and eventually you're going to start having declining. And I think the Permian now, if from Earth, like if it's not already peaked, it's going to peak very soon. Like even like the companies down there are saying like, yeah, we expect it to peak. If it's not already, it's going to peak soon.
Well,
So
thank
it's like
God we're gonna, go all electric and go all renewable, right?
if you've got the supply
I mean,
chain set up
seriously,
for it,
like that's an argument I think about. Is I'm like, hey, like I always tell people, like, you are you tired of like going to war in the Middle East? Get rid of oil. It's like you
well,
want to not die in the Middle East? Like, let's start getting off oil. Now I know you could be like, okay, well, you got petrochemicals, you got plastic. You're always gonna have some, but like that's one big way to kind of try to push that out of the equation as much as possible. And I think it was George Bush. I think it was like back in the early 2000s. I think they were saying like one of the actual good things he did was he started being like, okay, we're going to start drilling oil for the United States. And it was like before
yeah,
that,
that
we
was
just
that was
poured it.
the fracking boom. Yeah,
Yeah.
but two, like I don't want to undersell it with like 'cause in the United States, about I think it's 60 to 80% of our oil consumption. It's not transportation, which means like you put it in your car or whatever. It's petrochemicals, it's plastics. They even use oil in asphalt, so like even just having the roads themselves.
It's the really thick stuff.
Steel making, like we use oil and
Diesel,
stuff people
diesel
don't even understand.
generators, all that kind of stuff.
Like you could completely have 100% electric car fleet tomorrow, and you're still going to be needing about 60 to 80% of the oil needs we currently have. And I don't think a lot of people, like back in the 2000s, there was the peak oil movement, and it's starting to come back now because I think people are starting to realize, like, yeah, like we, the whole energy market situation is very concerning. Like we are. So conventional oil production globally peaked sometime in the late 2000s. Some people say 2005. I've seen 2006. I think the IEA says 2006, but regardless, somewhere around that time, conventional oil production peaked. And then the statistic that really should keep people up at night. So we started the fracking boom right around 2010 is when most people say. So that kind of made global oil production keep going up. So if you look in the past 15 years since 2010, 90% of all gains in global oil production were due to fracking here in the United States. So, like, only 10% of the global growth in production was from elsewhere. The problem with that is global oil production peaked, period, not just conventional, like including fracking, peaked in, I think it was November of 2018. We have never surpassed that global level in this 6, 7 years since then. So, and then till you look at like discoveries have absolutely plummeted. The whole reason we're doing fracking now is because there just isn't enough conventional deposits left. And now a lot of the people in like the fracking market are saying like, well, we got to start looking at offshore again. Like we got to start doing offshore like big time because like fracking's pretty much going. Like I don't think people get like this whole like this past decade of like U.S. energy energy independence was based pretty much solely on fracking, and now that fracking era is dying. And that has, in of itself, we could do a whole episode on that, because like the economic consequences of that are actually terrifying if you really think about it. Like I don't like yeah, I know we're going to do like an episode on like technology and stuff, so I don't want to get bogged down too much on like the EVs and stuff. But like I am deeply, deeply concerned about the supply chains for that, even the like economic feasibility of it. Like there's a lot of good arguments to be made that like that's just not a viable path in of itself. But it's like I said, even if you discount that, like you can completely replace your transportation sector with EVs or whatever, and you still got the situations like we have not found any good alternatives to petrochemicals in agriculture. We have not really figured out any good alternatives to plastics yet. We have not really figured out asphalt, steel making, so many other things we use oil for. And to kind of tie it back into the whole, like what we're talking about tonight with like I said, like, something that starts off with Iran, the Persian Gulf gets closed down because they've got God knows how many missiles that can be directed against. Like, even if you wipe out the Iranian Navy in one day, like, like some people want to believe we can still do like we did in like 87 or whatever. Like, yeah, you could do that, but then they use those missiles to turn those refineries into paste. That'll take years to rebuild. That's not just something you can turn the taps on and be working the next day. So like even if like we completely destroyed the Iranian Air Force, their Navy, and then toppled their government, and the time it takes us to do that, if they turn those refineries into paste, it's the same end result either way. Like you just
So
you,
that's why I've always said, to an extent, I think Republicans are starting to become more okay with renewable energy, because I'm like, I think for them, they're like, we need to decrease this as much as possible and as quick as possible, because that's the only way we're going to get this thing to last longer.
well,
It's almost kind of like a cost saving, and they say, oh yeah, like we're into all green energy and shit, and it's like yeah,
what's really super funny about that is like most of the jobs nowadays are in red states. That's why they've kind of dropped a lot of it. But then too, what makes it even funnier is if you look at like just the geography, kind of being, it would kind of work out that way. Like you got to think about like all those Great Plain states, that are out there. That's where all the wind is. Or you got Texas, that's where all the solar is. I mean, it's kind of funny. Like geographically, it should have been obvious, like even a decade ago, like what was going to happen with that. But yeah, I mean that
well,
is a
and,
big
and
thing now.
I'm surprised they're going it back to nuclear.
It's like I said, I'm not trying to like take us into like the whole. We really need to do an episode on energy, but like to kind of do a quick thing on that, like nuclear.
We need a space AI video.
Yeah, we need to do like a whole like
Dude,
episode
I
on like
want space AI so bad.
we need to do that at some point. But yeah, like energy, like nuclear. And I've researched this pretty hard. I've talked to people in the field. I actually considered briefly a few years ago trying to get into it, but that's really about the best. Like really. So, not all energy production is the same. So there's what's called base load, and then there's I think it's called intermittent. So, obviously the wind doesn't blow all the time, the sun doesn't shine all the time. So, with like a lot of the solar and stuff like that, you have to also have some way to store energy when like if the sun's really bright, but you're producing too much energy to consume, that creates brownouts because you're overloading the system, or you just waste all that energy. But then there's the opposite side's blackouts when you don't have enough. So in order to make best use of it, really about the only way you can do that is do storage. So they've got like a term for it for solar and wind. I can't remember what it's exactly called, but basically it just boils down to like you pair it with like giant batteries. So like you're storing that extra energy for when. But the problem with that is that plays merry hell on your infrastructure. Like it causes substations, power lines, stuff to burn out at a lot higher rate than like currently it does with like natural gas and stuff. So really what you need to do is as much as possible, you need to have your electric production be what's called baseload. So it's like you can have a stable, dependable, you're going to have this much amount every single day, and there's not really going to be that much variation. So like right now, most of our baseload is natural gas. Before it was coal. So if you go nuclear's baseload, you build X amount of plants, you'll know they'll produce this amount of energy. You'll consume this much, so you can say like, oh, like I think France is kind of the poster child for nuclear. So they're like, oh yeah, like 70 to 80% of our energy is met by that, and then the rest is the variation of stuff like intermittent stuff. So like peaking, they call it peaking. So like most countries, people use the most energy they will from like roughly 5 p.m. to roughly 9 p.m., which kind of makes sense. Everybody's getting home from work or whatever, cooking dinner and stuff. So for most of the day, you can make do with your base load, and then you need that extra for those hours of the day. So nuclear high base load can do it, and there's other factors like where nuclear produces really high like heat, because where it's more or less, you could almost say it's a chemical reaction. So like a lot of chemical reactions give off heat. You can also, a lot of times you can use that heat for secondary purposes. So like one of the things they've come up with now, like I keep bringing up, like you need oil for like steel production or stuff like that. You can potentially use that waste heat, is what they call it, from like nuclear for stuff like steel. For steel would be an example, really good example. Or you can desalinate water, or eventually, if they ever get figured out, potentially produce hydrogen from it. So like you can potentially come up with like hydrogen cars or whatever. But there's it's our best chance, is the way I'll put it. And I think that's a huge reason why the Chinese are like all in on nuclear now.
Yeah.
So
I mean, so the way that I've always looked at nuclear was I was like, because everything you just said, like they're really good at being able to combine and
mhm.
scale it, and then scale it, but there's a big financial cost to it. And so what I've always kind of heard is it was like, especially these stage 4 reactors, I mean they're really good. And much smaller, you can have more modular systems. And so what I've always heard was basically being like pretty soon you're going to have like nuclear reactors like within manufacturing community supplying all the energy that they need.
Mhm.
Uh, and you're gonna have like these modular grids and all this other kind of stuff. And I've always heard that's like gonna be what it
Real
is. But
shit, Andrew. That's real.
what?
So you're basically talking about like the small modular, the SMRs and stuff.
Yeah, and but I've always heard is like, I mean, this everything is to get to so they can get fusion online.
Yeah, which and like kind of make a really quick point here, because like since you brought that up, there's been a multitude of articles recently talking about how like the Chinese are starting to leapfrog us in that. They're actually starting to pull ahead of us in fusion research. Like they just recently had, I want to say it was like one, because they have like a couple of test reactors, if I'm not mistaken, and they've got, I think it was their one in Shenzhen, which don't hold that against me. I'm just thinking, I seem to remember it was in Shenzhen. They just had, I think they had like they set like the record now for like the longest stable reaction in like fusion. So back in 2022 when we had that first confirmed reaction, I think it was for like half a second or something. So the Chinese had theirs for like, I think it was 17 seconds. So I mean, like, we've been making further progress too, but like it's kind of clear at this point they're leapfrogging us. So that's in of itself, that should be kind of raising alarm bells, because if whoever gets to fusion first, like that is going to be, if we can actually do it and you can commercialize it, that changes the ball game in so many ways. It's almost impossible to even comprehend. But they're not. The other thing I'll say for them too is like they're smart enough not to put all their eggs in one basket. Like that I think we've talked about in the group chat. Like they've got the new for the first time ever they developed, what is it called? The thorium molten salt reactor, I think is, I can't remember what the exact name is, but that's basically what it is. It's just a molten salt reactor using thorium. That is the next best thing to fusion, and they've got their test reactor up, and they're actually running it at like test production rates. I mean, it's still only, I think the day I sent in the group chat, you pointed out like it's only 30 gigawatts, which that is kind of low for like a reactor, but it's like it's kind of like a test. Like we don't even have any test reactors at this point, like testing that
We have
technology.
none.
Yeah, we have none. So I mean, like
None.
something's better than nothing. And that's really sad, because we had the world's up until the Chinese brought this online. We had the record because we had it didn't run on thorium, but it was a molten salt reactor. We tested actually at Oak Ridge for I know we shut it down like 1969 or something, but like we had it going for like 5 years or so, and then that was it. Like nobody, not even us, nobody else had done it till the Chinese finally, and they were the first to like integrate like thorium into it. So it's like, that you could make the national security concerns on that, but it's also just like we're kind of approaching a situation like even leaving aside like the whole like climate thing or whatever, which personally I think is a little bit overblown, but like whatever. Um, the really good point. I've got statistics saved somewhere. I need to pull them up sometime. But like we're finding like 1 barrel of oil for every 5 we're burning right now. So I mean, basic mathematics kind of dictates where we're going with like oil as a fuel source, even if we don't, transition like we're running out. Like it's this is the dying days, the petroleum age, really.
So it's
And
funny. It's funny you had mentioned Oak Ridge because one of the things that I was thinking about was I was like, you know, East Tennessee and specifically Knoxville, Oak Ridge area, like we are primed for this opportunity. Like when you really think about it, it's like, okay, you're gonna have a ton of nuclear research startups, companies, and it's like, okay, like naturally that one of the possibilities is in Oak Ridge. And it's like, okay, then you have all the manufacturing that's kind of in the southeast and in Tennessee specifically. It's like, okay, so now you got the jobs. And so it's like, there's really just a great opportunity there for East Tennessee to kind of like connect all the dots and be a powerhouse. You got TBA, so it's gonna be cheap. And one statistic I saw that was interesting, and I was like, this is why nuclear, like you really need to get into it to really kind of drive some of these costs down. I think it was like 18 cents maybe per kilowatt is what it costs in the US. And it's like China, it's like 10 cents. And it's like, okay, if you want your companies to also compete, especially in manufacturing, you have to drive the cost of energy down like almost by half. It's like okay, like you got to do that, and you have to be able to make sure that you can supply everything you need. And it's like that's a huge lift, and I honestly don't think the United States can match up to that.
that's I think I know I brought it up in the group chat at least. I don't know if I've ever brought it up in like the podcast, but that's been one of my biggest concerns for a while. It's just like so France is like, if I remember correctly, like 70% powered by nuclear. Hungary is on track to be like 80%. Like, well, they've really slipped in under the radar. Like, people have not been paying attention to Hungary. I think Slovakia is like 60%. And then, like, South Korea is currently like 40%. But, like, if you look at like the stats, they have one of the best like rates in the world in terms of like being able to build plants for like a cheap rate on time. I think there is like I want to say China gets one done at like 2.4 billion, and they get it done like I think it's like 4 to 6 years. South Korea gets it done in like 4 years for like 2.2 billion or so. So I mean, they're just a little bit cheaper than how China does it. And it's and what's crazy about it, like the thing with the South Koreans is the design they're doing is I think it's called like the KP 1200. I might be wrong on that, but it's some variation of that. And basically, what it is General Atomics, which used to be the main nuclear people here, had designed what's called the AP 1000. Since you're from Georgia, you probably should be familiar with that because that's what the Vogtle nuclear power plant they just finished.
From Georgia.
Yeah, and that was the first one we built since like I think like '92, like the first new build,
So, and before that, it was Watts Bar.
which was
And
like what, like '78 or something.
well, but that was in Tennessee, and it was like,
Yeah,
okay, Georgia, Tennessee, and it was like that was it.
and a lot of the reason it works so well in the South, like a lot of people don't talk about this, TVA, like a lot of the regulations and stuff, like it just worked out better.
Well, and that's one thing that's kind of irritated me is it's like TVA, and I've always kind of said this is like an energy policy. I was like, look, maybe you disagree with me and whatnot, but it's like, okay, we have these coal-fired power plants. We need to convert them to something better. Like we need to do that. And it's like, okay, down here in TVA, like you guys should be one of the first ones leading the charge. Like, here's a goal. And as one of these things I was thinking about, it's like, what would it cost, especially, you got say 6 or 7 nuclear power plants that you could put in. It's like, okay, if you replace every single coal-fired power plant with nuclear, what outcome would you get from that? And it's like I think Tennessee could be or TVA could be leading that charge and being like, hey, like if we got six, now this kind of becomes cheaper for everybody who's in the market. And I
Yeah,
know
because it's
they're
economies
trying
of
to
scale.
get theirs as well. So it's like, okay, if you could standardize, hey, we're all doing this, and you can drive
Yeah.
the cost down dramatically, that'd be huge.
Let me make a, since you brought that up, I should have said this earlier too. So you mentioned we should standardize. I did not know this up until we started building Vogtool. There was no set U.S. design. Like each nuclear power plant is its own like individual design. So I mean, like imagine what hell that plays with like supply chain and like you don't get economies of
Well,
scale when
and
each
it's
one
got to be
is.
custom built.
Yeah,
Every
it's literally
single one of them.
it's basically craft built each nuclear power plant, which I mean obviously like even like the most basic economic knowledge tells you how that drives up costs. So the reason the South Koreans have got it down and the Chinese too, I think the French even now, they all standardize their
The
designs.
French
Like I
do have
said,
it, yes, Austin.
yeah, so like the South Koreans, like I said, are using some variation of like or the design General Atomics came up with. So it's like they standardize on that, and then two, they build so many, they get that experience. They kind of figure out what works and what doesn't work. And like I think Vogtool is now up to like is it 4 or 6? I know they want to go up to like I know there's been some talk of like wanting to build like 2 more because they've got that knowledge now. They don't want to let it go. And then two, they just enjoyed Vogtool like in terms of like stable power at this point. But oh, and before I forget, so we're talking about like the TVA getting really on it. Texas has been passing a bunch of laws to like spur like experimental nuclear. Like they passed a big one, I think in January, and now they've got a couple of experimental reactors probably going to be built down there. So I mean, like Josh, you guys working with like AFP and stuff, I would be, if I could encourage you, I'd be like, hey, here's what Texas passed. Maybe we should be passing this in Tennessee. Like, like it's like Andrew said, like point out, like already got Oak Ridge, we've got UT with engineering school.
Yep.
I mean, like, and two, where it's in the TVA, like I said, like the TVA environment, like I cannot remember all the specifics on it, but like where the TVA is like the one of a kind in America. So it's like it's kind of got its own already kind of got like a specialized environment to work in, which I think would be more conducive than even like, or at least as conducive as Texas is, because where Texas has its own power grid. But like,
I thought about even going further. I was like, okay, so it's the Tennessee Valley, but I'm like, I thought about like, okay, let's rebrand it. It's no longer the Tennessee Valley. It's maybe the Appalachian Regional Energy Commission or something like that. You know
oh
what I
yeah,
mean? Being like, okay, now we're going to expand this. We're going to go all the way up to Pittsburgh, and we're going to go to some of these other areas and start expanding what's within our scope. And I
and
think then it's like, okay, now you're seeing it even to a bigger scale, And like I said, a lot of manufacturing coming to Appalachia, and it's like, okay, like you can supply them with the energy that they're going to need.
well, two, like since you brought that up, both Virginia and like North Carolina now are like really interested in nuclear.
Yeah.
And I know Duke Energy is debating whether or not to build, another nuclear power plant here because they need to either they're torn between I think it's either building like 4 or 6. It's like between like 4 and 6 natural gas plants, or they got to build a nuclear power plant, and they're kind of going back and forth on that. So I mean, like that would be a really good way to be like, hey, like Virginia, and North Carolina, we can form a consortium with them, like kind of help them with that, and that gives us a chance to kind of gives us a confirmed market. Like
Now, and,
there's a
and your supply chain is way better in
yeah.
terms of the fuel source. Like, Russia's a big player, but it's like Canada, Australia, US, like we've got much more stable supplies. And then if you start looking at actually what's it called, recycling nuclear waste, it's like, okay, you can really make this go for hundreds of years.
So the whole thing with like thorium, why people are so interested in thorium, is it's literally so abundant in its natural state. You could just about power the entire world on thorium until the sun burns out. And like I think natural thorium is it's enough for like I want to say at least 1,000 to 1,200 years is what I'm thinking the estimate was. But if you include it, but like you can actually get it out of seawater because there's like a significant amount of thorium in the ocean's water. Just for whatever reason, I think it's like asteroids and like the sun and stuff, but whatever. Like if you got it out of the ocean water, like you could literally power the Earth on thorium until the sun like blows up. So I mean, like there's plenty like if you went the thorium route, there's plenty. Even in like you said, like so pure uranium, there's enough in North America to sustain us for like 80 years. If you included like there's a way because see like the way it currently works. I know I'm getting really into the details, so I'm trying to keep it high level. Current designs, you basically use like 3% of the uranium in a fuel rod, so like 97% of the energy is still there. So like a lot of what the new reactor designs are is like, let's see if we can increase that from like we only use 3% to let's say we use 10% or 12% in a fuel rod, and then ideally eventually we'll get to the point we can just use it all. So if you did that, yeah, that would basically be an indefinite fuel source. And then if you do thorium and you get it out of the seawater, yeah, you're pretty much good for life.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
mean, like,
and that's what I think it'll be, and that's one reason, like I said, for me, I'm like every single thing's looking that way, and it's like I know some people are like, hey, I don't want to live by a nuclear power plant, but I'm like, that's when these stage 4 reactors are really going to come in. Like, you really need to show people, like, hey, like, this is not this huge nuclear power plant. You know, no one's going to want to live next to it. Like, I think about the ones on the aircraft carriers. And it's like, okay, they all have nuclear power plants on there, and then they last for like 50 years before they have to come in and like get their fuel changed out. And I'm like, okay, could New York City not have that? Remember, they used to have all rolling they'd have blackouts, and especially when there's really bad weather and it takes out some of the power lines and stuff. And I'm like, okay, imagine if every major city had their own nuclear power plant. But it was like it wasn't like what you thought it would be. It wasn't like this like huge scale. Maybe it's 5 or 6 within Atlanta or New York, just kind of covering all the key areas. It's like that's really what it could do. And I think that's why it's so important for the future and sustainability and biofuels. I think that's where it's really going to come in play. But you got to get people to change their minds on it, and I feel like that's the toughest part.
well, I mean, as of according to Pew, since like 2022, like a majority now does approve of nuclear power. Like most people are actually pretty interested in it, and a lot of the fear seems to come from like older generations. I guess is the best way to put it, like boomers and Xers and stuff that they grew up with the Cold War, so it kind of makes sense why they kind of still have that. Yeah, it's completely baseless, but I mean it's an understandable fear. But like millennials and Zoomers and stuff, like they've never really had to live with that fear, and they're kind of like us, like guys that can kind of sit down, like learn about and get kind of interested in it. I was like, okay, this ain't that big of a deal. So
Well, and I think what's also really important in that is that it's like, okay, you see all these failures and you see all these places that do have issues. For example, like what Fukushima, and it was like I think that was like a stage 2 or like uh
it was a meltdown, but only like one person like directly died from it.
well, I know, but it was what like maybe a class 4 or a fourth. It wasn't a fourth gen. It was just like a second generation, and it's like, okay, like we've gone so much better since then, and like to where it's like, if it was 1% back then, it's like a thousandth times smaller than that. You know what I mean? Like huge advances have been made. And I think it's really important to also kind of think about like, okay, like these are different than what has been previously out there. And it's like, okay, like let's start, like I said, like let's go back and like, okay, let's start updating every, you know, second generation nuclear power plant is going to become a fourth generation nuclear power plant. And it's like you're not getting any worse, you're not getting any less safe or anything like that. And it's like, why can't you have a like a fast track regulatory process for that? And I think if you incentivize it, you can get the cost way down, you know? I feel like that's kind of what you need to really get it going. What do you think, Austin? You're muted.
Yeah, it really just comes down to like economies of scale and stuff. Like I mean, that's like I said, that's a big reason the South Koreans do so well now is because they've just,
Austin, you took the words out of my mouth there. The economy down to scale, dude.
or economies of scale.
That took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, valid.
But,
from way beyond.
oh, and like another thing I'll point out like really fast too. So like you've got all that waste heat. I brought up how like potentially you could eventually use that for hydrogen production if they could get hydrogen figured out. Like or even like forgetting hydrogen, like even right now you could potentially like make ammonia on like a economic scale, which you could use as a gasoline replacement. Now it would have issues, but it like you can currently put refined ammonium into like internal combustion engines. Like that is feasible. Like the biggest issue with it is ammonia has like a lower energy content than gasoline, but like you could do that now. So I mean, like you would, there'd be trade offs, but at least that technology is currently available like right now.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't even have to do like the whole like convert everything to EVs. Like you could just literally run currently existing vehicles off ammonia, more or less.
Um, last question. I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Josh, I'll go with you first. Who's whose head is gonna roll from the whole Signal group chat leak?
The FBI.
Well, but I mean, like, so you think no, Cash Patel isn't gonna get
It's a
fired.
joke. That was a joke, by the way. Um, so Signal for me is a funny thing because I mean I use it. I mean, like our entire organization has used it, like when we're on deployments, places, and things. Um, and Signal is something that was downloaded on a lot of government computers. Um, so no, I don't think Cash Patel. I don't think his head rolls. Are you looking for like a single person? Or are you looking for like
Like
a
from the
mass
group chat
majority?
leak, whose head is gonna roll from that? Like do you think like Vance is gonna be the one who's gonna have to get hit with the accountability and get fired? Do you think it's Tulsi? Do you think it's Hegseth?
I think it's
Who do you
Tulsi.
think's gonna or Waltz? Who do you think's gonna take the blow?
I think they go as low as they can go. Like ideally, if they can get Waltz, it's fine. But like, I don't think they get Vance or Tulsi. I think Tulsi would probably, in theory, should be the person. But I think they go with Waltz.
Do you think Hegseth will
Do I think what? I can't hear you.
do you think Hegseth will be the one who goes?
Hmm, it's a good question. Maybe potentially. I could see that potentially happening.
Yeah. I was gonna say if they both go, then another one of our predictions was correct.
But where do you think they go though? Is my question for you then.
You know, I could see if things start escalating with Iran that they're going to want to bump Hegseth out. You know, one thing that isn't told us a super ton about was when FDR knew that World War II was coming, or it was like just right after, or something like that. It was somewhere around that time. He basically was like, okay, I need a wartime Secretary of State. I need a wartime Secretary of Defense. And I think if Trump does see that there is conflict on the horizon, I think he's like, okay, dump. Like we're gonna get someone a little bit more serious in here. And I could see then he goes back to like a Mattis or someone like that to kind of really be a little bit more professional about it.
I agree. Great, very well said, Andrew. I think that's phenomenal. I agree with that.
Um, Austin, what do you have to say to close us out?
Like in terms of which question?
I guess like so whose head do you think is gonna roll on for this whole Signal group chat leak?
I don't know. Like he
Like, do you think
defended
anyone is?
Waltz. I mean, like at this point, I kind of think it would be more like if they had moved in the first few days to get rid of somebody, yeah. But like at this point, I just feel like it's if they were going to get rid of anybody, it would have already happened. Unless it gets like unless something else comes out and it's just like extremely bad, I don't see anybody for this one.
Which I don't see there's any reason for it to happen. You know, it's kind of like it's not like they have someone on the inside who's like constantly giving them information, right? I mean, maybe they do, and maybe that'll happen. But it's like, they accidentally added a guy in. It's like, okay, don't fucking do that again. You know what I mean? And it's like, I think it's hard to kind of see a pattern when we don't really have much data to go off of.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
because
I
it's
agree.
like I mean, they've only been in the job for 2 months. They haven't been probably needing to use it that much.
No, yeah.
Um, I don't know, but Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll end it there.
All right, ending in 3, 2, 1.